So welcome everybody, and as Evelien mentioned, there's a link there in the chat if you'd like to interact during the session or ask any questions of our speaker today. She'd like you to use that link. That way we can kind of keep all those interactions. She can pull them up during the session. So please feel free to use that. So I'd like to welcome you all to our April microconference on community conversations about open discussions on openness. And on behalf of Apereo, I'd just like to, again, thank you all for being here today, and just kind of give you an overview. So these statistics here show a little bit about some of the engagement that we've been generating around these microconferences. We've had quite a lot of registrations over the last year or year and a half that we've been running these. So you can see that we have a very global participation. And Apereo is also growing. We had 13 projects, but now we have 14 because we recently had Sam Vera join the Apereo family. So we're very excited about that. So you can see we're a growing community of contributors and collaborators that span, all across the higher ed landscape. So thank you for being a part of that. And I am Wilma Hodges. I'm the Apereo Board Vice Chair. I'm also the Sakai Community Manager and the founder of Red Willow Solutions, a consulting company. So I will give a shameless plug for my consulting. If you are looking for instructional design, training, technical writing, UX, research design, project management, or online community management, I specialize in all of those things, particularly the online community management related to open source projects. So I hope that you'll think of me if you find yourself in need of services in those areas. I'd also like to thank our microconference sponsors. We have JMA Consulting, which is our Civi CRM specialist. They do the hosting and consultations for Civi CRM, which is what you used to register today. It also has quite a lot of other capabilities for community and management sort of tasks. So we actually did a webinar on that. If you're interested, you could view that on our YouTube channel. Our platform sponsor today is Big Blue Button. That's the tool that we're using to present with and all of you to interact within. So we're grateful to Blindside Networks for providing that. And then, of course, the Apereo community. It's a group of open source advocates in higher ed and technology. And so we're grateful to all of our projects and community members making this possible. So if you would like to sign up for our communications newsletter, that will make sure that you get reminders about upcoming events, microconferences, and other things that we're doing. So I encourage you to go to our website, www.apereo.org. If you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see a little Join Apereo Communications link, and then you can sign up for our news and events there in the footer of the website. So today's speaker is Evelien Renders, and Evelien facilitates international collaboration in higher ed at SURF, the cooperative organization for IT in Dutch education and research. So I'm going to hand it off to Evelien, and she will do a more thorough introduction as she takes up today's topic.
Thank you, Wilma. And thanks so much for inviting me. I had the pleasure of connecting with the Apereo community and some of your colleagues at the EduCalls conference last year. That was in Nashville, I think. And it was my second time actually in North America. I spent in 2022, at the end of COVID, I spent 3 months traveling around. I would love to know a little bit about who is in the room. So if you have access to a keyboard or a phone, do enter the Mentimeter. I will be asking a few questions during this webinar because I don't like talking for 50 minutes without knowing if things are landing well. And also, I have maybe 3 hours of content and only 1 hour of time. So I would love to hear what kind of sparks your interest, what you are interested in hearing about, and then I will model my webinar to that. But of course, first I will quickly introduce myself so you get a view of who I am, and feel free to keep filling in the Mentimeter during this, this introduction. So Wilma already told you I am working at SURF, which is in the Netherlands. We are a national research and education network, which is, what's it called in the US again? Okay, I will come to that later. But this is the cooperative organization that is facilitating the higher education institutions, but also vocational and educational training institutions. We do things like EduRoam, which is the Wi-Fi that is going global already. But I'm also the president of EUNIS, and EUNIS is kind of the equivalent to EduCause. So we are a community of IT professionals working in education. I do also a bit of international collaboration, which is my role at SURF. So although I am working in a national context, I look at the international context. And this here is my cat, Charlie, and he will be going in and out of the screen sometimes. So how did I actually come to do this job? Well, I work at a pretty interesting intersection of international collaboration, digitalization, sustainability, and higher education. And I studied classics, ancient heritage. Then I went into the international office. I became an Erasmus Plus officer, which is a European student mobility program. And then I went into IT, and this is the place where I'm now presenting from. So I always like to show a little bit of like where I am, and I'm now in my own house doing this. Don't worry about the slides. I will actually share them afterwards in a PDF. I'm sure that we can send an email out or something where you can find them. And also you can reuse them actually. So I always think it's very important because I use a lot of visuals, and you can reuse those visuals, and you can share them with the CC BY and CD&D license. But first, there is so much to talk about. So these are all of the topics that I actually have in my slide deck. And I think it's a slide deck of around 140 slides or something. So I would love to get your input, and I will go very quickly in like 5 minutes. I will go through all of these topics, and then I will ask you what sparked your interest, and then you can tell me what you actually found the most interesting to hear about. So I will just go back to the Menti for quick to see who is here. So we have some people from all over the world, I see, mostly North America. People from Apereo, program manager, CVCRM, working with data models. Okay, great. Skills and credentials, that will definitely come back in this conversation. So don't be afraid if this goes way too quick, because that's the whole point of this first 5-minute introduction. We will dive deeper after this. So education institutions, they work in a very complex landscape. But when it boils down to the learner journey, we see the same steps happening again and again. A student chooses a course, applies for the course, takes the course, and then gets certified. This can happen on a course level, program level. But to support that, the institution actually needs to send around a lot of this data. So the first topic that we can dive into is kind of this learner journey and how we visualize this and how we speak about this in an international context when you have to cross different languages and different cultures. Another part is when you then go to an institution level, you need to always decide which step are you going to take on the digital transformation ladder. Do you want to stick to digitization, just taking a picture of something or putting it in a PDF? Do you want to digitalize it, or do you want to digitally transform it? And it's not always the best choice to go for the highest level of digital transformation, because that also takes a lot of work, and not every step or every process is actually suited to do the full digital transformation. So this is also something that we can dive deeper into. Then there's something that's very high on the minds in Europe, but I think actually also for this audience, and that is public values. So how do we make sure that our higher education is actually based around public values. Who owns the student data? How are the platforms actually building our education, and how do we serve our own models or someone else's business model? Who benefits from digital transformation? Is it equal in all countries? Right now it isn't. Do we as institutions and as countries have a meaningful control over our own digital infrastructure? And I can shed some light on how at least Europe is doing these things. And I would love to hear actually from you if there are similar programs happening around the world. Let me see. Yeah, that brings me to this map. And looking at the broader perspective. So this is a very boiled down perspective of the world. And you can definitely disagree with me. But overall, I see that this is kind of the narrative. So US, more commercial platforms, more vendor lock-in at the core of the learning infrastructure. I see in the global South, there are struggles with dependency on external platforms. They have to choose between something cheap that is completely reliant on big tech, or something that they need to host themselves and need to get all the expertise at. In Asia, you see a lot of rapid government-driven approaches to education infrastructure. And for example, in India, there's such a big demographic boom. They are rapidly scaling their government-backed infrastructure as well. Thank you, Patrick, for confirming my view of the US. I can also talk about the Dutch. So I can also zoom in very much into my own context and say something about the big digital transformation program that's happening in the Netherlands. We are facing rapid changes, but I think actually this might also transfer to other countries. Digitalization, evolving labor market, impact of AI, and NPULSE, which is our big digital transformation program, is working to future-proof the education sector. And lastly, or no, not even lastly, there is the topic of how do we actually talk to each other in terms of standards and data. So if you are trying to send data from one institution to the other, or from an employer to an education institution, you might need to agree on some things. And that is what we call architecture, and that is what we call standards. So we have developed some visual language to also facilitate that conversation and to make it less abstract. And then if you start talking about standards, people start asking, but what is there? What can I already use? So that's when you start mapping the ecosystem. And this is where it gets complicated very fast, because you get this whole kind of spaghetti of organizations and projects that are all working. And this is one of the mappings that was done in the enterprise architecture field in EUNIS. And we are trying to make this mapping a little bit more concrete by putting it into a structured database where you can see organizations, what topics are they working on, what standards are they creating, what kind of services are they implementing. And that's also something that I can show you. Okay. Lastly, we all look at this from a different perspective. So I will keep using these visuals throughout the whole presentation. So this is not really a separate topic, but this is more something to focus on, like, okay, how are we actually looking at this ecosystem? Can we kind of look at it from different perspectives and still keep the learner view central? I will go back to my overview slide, and then I will ask you the question what you are most interested in. So that one is right here. You can rank the topics, so you don't have to choose one favorite, but you can kind of rank them. And I'm really curious what you found most interesting. This is where it gets exciting for me, because I never tell the same story twice. I always keep having to kind of move it around, because I like to know what people want to hear. Great. I think you are quite consistent. International and European collaboration, yes. Mapping, yes. Public values, coming to the top. Okay, Great. I think this gives us a really good overview. There's someone still, I will wait a few more minutes, and then I will find the right slide in my deck to start with the public values conversation and go into international and European collaboration and the mapping and standards. Okay, wonderful. So my last question to you before we dive into that is there already one question or something that came to your mind that you want to share with us? Or a word that I said that you think, oh, that really needs to be shown right now. And if not, you can just share it actually in the Q&A once you start. So I will leave that open. You can come back to that and go to the Q&A whenever you want. Let me see. I want this to happen with
Koeker introduceert
sound.
de kraan die...
How does that work?
Water geeft de nieuwe koekerkraan nu ook koel, bruisend...
Stop. Okay, that's
filtered water.
A Dutch video. I wanted to show you that there is now a tap that actually works on any type of water that you want to get. So there are children growing up right now that can get bubbling water, sparkling water, that is, hot water, cooking water, any type of water, and it's all clean and they can all get it from the tap. So what happens to a kid when they grow up in that kind of environment? They start thinking that every type of water will come from their tap, right? They don't think about the infrastructure behind it. They just think about the ease. They don't even think about the ease, actually. They just use it. That is kind of the level of digital transformation that we are striving for in a lot of institutions. And if we compare that to the actual thing that's happening around the world, then we see that there's also a very different story that's happening.
I asked her if I could go collect water with her because it's something
I didn't want
never...
to have any sound here. Sorry. Here, I can turn it off. Okay. Because there's also a different story. There's also, this is Tariq from Kafta. She is in the global south. And what is happening is that she needs to walk around 1.5 hours every day to get drinking water. And that drinking water is not even clean. That drinking water is actually very dirty. There was someone who walked with her the whole way and then walked back. And then if you start comparing those different environments, you start thinking about, do we at every point need to strive towards the biggest step of the digital transformation, get everyone a cooker, or should we just go into the places where the bar is right now the lowest and try to raise the bottom? And this is a question that I've been asking myself, because in the Netherlands, I feel like we are mostly striving for perfect. And that last 5% of the work, getting it to like from 90 to 95% good, is so much more effort than getting something from 30 to 60%, which is actually raising the bottom, which is actually creating a better education infrastructure for the world instead of just for our tiny country. So this is kind of my own personal conviction to do this international infrastructure, because I want to see if we can make better choices in different countries to do some things in a less digital way, but still good enough. Because we don't have to reduce all friction. Friction is actually a really good part of life. But let's not drink water that makes us sick, right? Let's see if we can go, instead of just water from a stream or water from a well, if we can get everyone to filtered tap water, that would be fine. We don't need the boiling, sparkling, whatever water from our tap. We can just do that in a different way. So making that choice actually puts it in a context of local, regional, national, European, and global, because you have to make choices at each of these levels. And that's where it brings me to the world. How do we change the world? Well, the world has changed already without us doing a lot, but I think we have some choices that we can make. And we can start that conversation by creating a terminology around values that we can easily reuse. So talking about autonomy, justice, and humanity is kind of the three categories that we group public values in for the Netherlands. And this is specific for education. So when we talk about autonomy, for example, we talk about the independence of educational institutions. And the independence is the way that we can actually choose when to use which system, and that we are not locked in to just one provider. We can choose how we deliver, what we actually teach the student, and we can choose how we support that education. If we talk about justice, we look at also the trustworthiness of information. Can we actually trust what is being told to our students and to ourselves? And this is where, of course, the large language model prediction comes in, where AI is sometimes not telling the truth. And right now, the search results on, let's say, Google have actually worsened because they have created this very quick AI function that sometimes just shares bullshit with us. So can we actually change? Well, I think we can. And it starts by looking at, for me, student mobility around the world, because we have so many people that are being educated worldwide. And these international students that are already moving around, we can support them better in what they are doing. When I talk about student mobility, as a European, I always think about Erasmus, because Erasmus Plus is kind of the big mobility program in Europe. And it started already 30 years ago, and it has millions of students that go around. And one of the big aims of this plan is also to enhance digital skills and competencies for the whole society. So when I was just talking about what we teach the students, I really want to say I also feel like a lot of articles that I read when it says something about AI in higher education, for example, they get confused about what they're actually talking about. Are they talking about the content? So do we teach the student about AI? Or do we use AI in how we teach, so how we deliver? So that's mostly the teachers. Or do we facilitate maybe the digital transformation or the education journey with something like artificial intelligence or any type of algorithm? Or do we do general business or operations in this way? So I think when we're talking about digital transformation and something digital for education, we really need to make a distinction on what we are focusing on. So me personally, I'm focusing on the green layer, the third layer, the logistics behind it. So how do we enroll students? How do we get them to choose a course? How do we get them into a learning management system and out of it? And how do we create credentials for them? And to do that, we need something called interoperability. And this is where a lot of the eyes glaze over, but I think that you will already know what I'm talking about. So you might have a lot of different people that are trying to put a plug into a wrong hole. So when I was traveling to the US, actually, I forgot my transformer or something, so I couldn't plug any of my plugs into your system. Well, that's where standards come in. The Erasmus program in Europe is facilitating a lot of this standardization, and they actually have it in their documentation as well. So when I'm talking about education, I look not only at the tools and services, but also really at the plumbing, the middle level, and the foundational layers beneath it. And interoperability in Europe has this kind of context of the European interoperability framework. We love creating frameworks for everything. And we talk about organizational, legal, semantic, and technical interoperability. And these levels, they kind of layer onto each other. And here we can put then different projects onto this level. But I won't go any further into this right now. Let me just see. Yeah, we don't have any questions at this moment. Great. So how do we then do European collaboration? Because I think you had at the top of the list, the public values and the international and European collaboration. What is being built by whom? So I am working in SURF, and SURF is one of the NRENs, and the NRENs are collectively in a member organization called GÉANT. So there are 38 across Europe, but this is also a global network because these NRENs, they actually connect worldwide, for example, in the fiber network. So we have this kind of sea cables, for example, that are coming into the Netherlands, and some of my colleagues are literally working on that, which I always find very fascinating. If you look at Canada and the US, this is where I forgot the name. Internet 2 is actually the NREN there, but also Canary and ESNet. And they are connecting us together. And what I like is that this global REN, the Research and Education Networks, they work together to scale up certain services that are working really well. For example, Apereo. It started in the Netherlands, actually, as an idea, like, why can't we just have students and teachers open their laptop at any education institution and not have to log into the Wi-Fi, but actually just have Wi-Fi because they are a student and a teacher and they already have a login to Edugain. So this was created, and right now, worldwide, Apereo is being used, and this is a federated approach that was very scalable. And this is one of our big success stories. And I think we can create more options like this that are sovereign, scalable, and like, I would say sexy solutions because they are easy. That you can actually use them and people can understand why this is necessary. And this brings me to kind of the darker side of my presentation, because in the Netherlands, we are also a little bit concerned, especially the last few years. When we were looking at the mail servers that are being used, we saw that the Netherlands is mostly dependent on Microsoft. So most of our public mail servers from our governments, and these are municipalities actually, are running on Microsoft. And this kind of got us to the question, what are we doing being so dependent on big tech that is not run on our own continent even? And this got us to look into the different ways we are structuring education and how we are kind of facilitating public services. So not only education, but also any type for the municipalities, for example. And this is the picture that I showed you before. And of course, this is a huge abstractive phase. It's abstracted, but it's also the narrative that we are using and that we keep repeating. For example, in Europe, and this is one of the things why Europe is a bit scared right now, is because we see such a disparity between the levels of basic digital skills in Europe. So these are all the European countries, and you can see that Finland and the Netherlands are quite high on the digital skills. But if you look at the whole EU, there are some countries that really lack the basic digital skills. And this is why, and I think actually this will probably be the same in the US if you start comparing by state or if you start doing these kinds of surveys. Not even sure if they are, if you have these kinds of surveys, but probably you do. And the European Commission kind of devised a whole plan, and they said, oh, we need to upskill, and this is why we have a union of skills, and we need to attract certain talent. And we created, at the same time, a competitiveness compass, because we also need to be more competitive with the rest of the world. And this is where things get a little bit iffy, like things are getting to, we get some friction, because if we start talking about this competitiveness compass and we look into the document, we see that education is only mentioned 4 times, university 3 times. But if we talk about companies and industry, it's mentioned 40 times and 70 times. And this is when the education sector in Europe started getting a little bit afraid, because we thought, oh, okay, so this means that maybe education and upskilling will only be done by industry for industry and not so much from the public education sector. So there's also some very critical voices in Europe saying that this obsession with competitiveness and innovation in Europe is going to lead to simplification, but also going to really give everything away to big tech that can say, we have a simple solution if only you just use this one simple system. And we already see this lobbying is happening. Yeah. So one of the examples of where this lobby is happening is the AI Act. So in Europe, we have quite a strict, well, GDPR was the first kind of strict rule around privacy. So it's the general data and privacy regulation. And it made sure that we actually had to have better privacy rules in Europe, but that actually kind of spread out worldwide, because why change the rules for just one continent? And now with the AI Act, we see that these rules are being kind of, the sharp edges are being taken out of it because we need to be more competitive with the rest of the world. And then there's the question of cloud infrastructure, because we don't have the cloud capacity in Europe as the US does. But still, right now, the cloud capacity is being kind of made more and more and more. So more is being built. And it's all because, for example, Microsoft has to say, we have everything on European soil. But if it's still being managed by a big tech company that can say, you know what, we're going to retract your access, which actually happened a year ago in the International Criminal Court in The Hague, we kind of got afraid, like, okay, so our kind of access to these tools can just be taken away at any time. So this is a lot about the European infrastructure. Let me just go to this question that I saw here. Practices can differ in interoperability. How do you manage relationships among those who have different priorities? Okay, I will get back to this later, actually. Yeah, let me just go and finish up this European story. So one of the reactions that Europe is having is we created the Euro stack. So we kind of visualized the European, or the stack that is needed to do any kind of digital thing. And this is not just for education. This is very sector over sector arching, well, over every sector. And this digital stack, we are now kind of mapping, okay, what projects are happening in these different components, like sovereign cloud or the pan-European connectivity network. And we still see that the key firms of most of these layers are actually not European. But of course, in some of the, for example, the chips, the Netherlands is coming up. So that is Eurostack. I will go from this to talk more about the interoperability aspect. So I will kind of skip a little bit of the EUNIS stuff. So how do you manage relationships among those who have different priorities? Yes. I think my first thing would be to go to who are we actually doing this for. So for example, we take the learner, and in Europe right now, we have this program called European University Alliances. So we already had the Erasmus program that I mentioned before. So this is quite a few years old right now. 60 million students have been reached. And the mother of Erasmus has actually died last year. And she was the one who was fighting for student mobility because her own credits from Columbia University weren't recognized. So she went to Columbia University, she got a degree, and then when she got home to Italy, people told her that she was only drinking tea and having parties, which is actually what a lot of mobile students are being accused of by their institutions. And none of her credits that she got there were recognized by her home institution. And this created her to be very much an activist. And then she set up the Erasmus program. a few years later. So from this Erasmus Student Mobility Program, also the European University Alliances emerged. And this is a project where 73 alliances are made of 9 institutions per alliance. So it's more than 650 institutions right now. And they are getting funding from the European Commission to, for example, do student mobility together. And the student mobility, they are striving to do one degree that can be taken across different institutions. So just imagine different states, different campuses, all working together to get one student credited for different things. And when you're talking about interoperability, we kind of go back to, okay, but what does the student then want? And it helps to kind of give that student a name and say, okay, this is Sam, and Sam is going through the learner journey. And to support that learner journey, we need to do different things. And this is where we created some use cases. I will go through them very quickly, looking at the time. Discovery, enrollment, then going for the learning and actually going to access the tools. You need to manage the educational resources as well. And sometimes the data that is created in these learnings, they need to be shared with other institutions. And this is all to kind of support that flexible education journey. And of course, in the end, you have the credentials. And from those credentials, you either want to go to an employer and say, hey, I want to apply for a job, or maybe you want to learn some more. And this is the lifelong learner journey. Looking at the lifelong learner journey, you can do that from different perspectives. And I'm now looking at the... So how do we align them? I think we start by taking those perspectives of the colleagues and then kind of looking at it together. Because I always think about actually Seth Godin. I don't know if you know him, but I once did the alternative MBA. It's kind of an MBA that he set up. And he always says people like us do things like this. And I think what he means is that you start with who is it for? So we start with thinking about who is actually doing these things that we find so weird or we cannot understand. And let's look from their perspective. And let's then try to see if we can look from each other's perspective and understand each other. So for example, the learner, they only see, the frustration of not being able to log into their learning management system or not finding the right course. And the CIO is zooming out and looking at maybe the financial streams in the organization. And the student mobility coordinator will look at this one process that they have been doing for 30 years already. And maybe a technology-minded person is looking from the bottom and is really forgetting that there's even a student in their institution. Kind of getting to those different perspectives is, I think, the way to start thinking about the different approaches in digital transformation and the different practices. If you have any response to that, by the way, you can just put it in the chat and I will see that as well. So we have no questions in the Q&A. Great. I'm curious which things resonate with your situation right now. So you can add them while I continue the presentation. Because I'm now going to go to the one thing that you had in your list. Let me see. I need to go back to this. Mapping. Yes, we are going to talk about how do we then map these different things. Because there's not just Europe and not just the US. There is a whole world out there. So I am the president of EUNIS, which is kind of like EDUCAUSE, but then you have Kuchio in Canada, you have USAISA in the UK, you have Axios in Japan, and you have CODIT, you have many others. You have Apereo, you have One EdTech, which are global, but also in Japan and also in Europe. So how are we all working together, and aren't we all just doing the same things over and over and over again? which is a little bit, of course, it's a human thing. We just keep reinventing the wheel. There's no other way. But if we start looking at how things are structured in each of the countries, we want to create an overview. And this is where I think the standards come in. So if we look at these different institutions, and they are all speaking a different language, for example, in the course catalog, then what we want to do is we want to make some agreements, for example, on architecture. So not just on a process level, but also informations, application, and technology. Standards, they are not just semantic standards, they can also be a process standard. And we can create reference architectures with reference components, and we can de-link kind of the reference components from the label of the brand. So for example, you have learning management system, Brightspace or Moodle, they have different components within them, and that is what we put in the architecture. And if we then want to start creating a joint course catalog, we might need to conclude, what do we put in a course catalog? How do we actually put the data of the planning and rostering in there, the learning outcomes, what are the requirements for applying for that course? And once we start putting that in the same format, we can have an interoperable ecosystem. But that is very easily said, maybe. But how do we then get to who is doing what? So which organizations are creating which standards? Which standards are then related to which services? Are they implemented? Has Moodle implemented LTI, the learning teaching integration, I think? And who is managing that standard? That would be one EdTech. And which collaborations are working on these different standards? How are they being funded? Which is also very important. And then what is the whole picture that we're doing? So in Europe, we created this app for it called EduAccess. And we have a European board, and this is a European Commons, we call it. But it's not just limited to Europe, it's just where it started. And I'm now searching actually for collaborators worldwide to make this even better and to get more of a global overview. So I'm talking to the Data Standards United people, people from Ed3 in the US. There was the Ed Matrix. So there are the same people popping up that are working on open standards who are really into these kinds of mapping exercises. And I'm seeing if we can collaborate with the community from EUNIS to kind of get this global overview. And maybe I can quickly show you the live version. So this is when you go to app.eduaccess.eu. For example, I'm not even sure if it's in there. No, I don't think so. But if we think about LTI, for example, a big, learning tools interoperability. It is a standard, and that standard is then managed by one EdTech, and it's related to different topics on the learner journey. And we can see different working groups are working on it. So you have the product steering committee, you have the working group, and you can see it's used by different services. There are many more actually, so this is not a full list. And there's a reference to other standards. And I think that is where it gets really interesting, because how is this related to other standards? And that's also where this overview right now falls short. Because right now it's really hard to kind of get the overview and see where these standards overlap. And this is one of the projects that actually in the US, there are more than 100 people now thinking about this and how to map the metadata standards. So this is very exciting work, I think, that is happening right now. And yeah, we're talking to philanthropy, and I think it's the Gates Foundation who wants to invest in this as well, or invest, I don't know if that's the right word, but like support, I think that's the right word. So I think we're onto something, and I think it might start getting easier, but yeah, that's the hope. By creating an overview, we get the full understanding of what is happening. Yes, and Sakai is actually doing great work in it. And you are not in our database, which is terrible. So if you have any feedback on the database, please share it with us. You can just put in Sakai is not on here, and then we will definitely put it in. Yeah, I'm sorry for that. Okay, let me just go back to see if there is... Oh, I didn't put this one in here. So yeah. So what resonates with your own situation right now? So every state in the US has different standards for what I teach. There is a new international standard I want to advocate for and align with. Yes. And this, I think Europe or any continent actually has this problem. In Europe, the problem is a little bit bigger because we have different languages. So a French standard will be in French and a Spanish standard will be in Spanish. But then there is an overarching European learning model that we are using. So for example, there are some projects that are doing work in this. So Quality Link in the EU, they are creating kind of an overview of standards for course catalogs. And then you get these types of overviews, which I really like. So when you're thinking about programs and courses, organizations, course instances, but even the people who are applying for a course and then the rooms that they're being held in, you see that different standards are kind of tackling the same topics, but not all are tackling the same ones. So we are now choosing one to be the reference standard, and the others are trying to align to that reference. So ELM, the European Learning Model, is kind of our spine, as we call it. And then we map the other standards to the spine. And then we see if we can create an aggregator or a translation between those. So it's hard work, but it is really worthwhile to do. And I hope that we can also do this on a more global level instead of just in Europe. Okay, that was one comment. What role is big tech playing in the standards creation and adoption? Yeah, it seems like Down to Learn or Anthology have a lot of influence through membership with One EdTech. Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think One EdTech, so personally, I am on the One EdTech Europe board, and I feel like they are having quite a healthy approach to collaborating with public-private. But yeah, that's I don't have a full view of it, of course, but I think it's better than a standard that's just being created by one big tech company, for example. I don't know if it's the right example, but I heard something about driver's licenses, and Apple had, introduced the standard for digital driver's licenses, and I think it shouldn't be created by Apple. It should be created by public collaboration, public-private collaboration, fine, but at least it should be a collaboration. Yeah. If anyone has a comment to that, feel free to also put it in the chat, or you can also open your mic if you want. And then we have another one. So the EduAccess platform seems a great tool to explore. Do you know of any plans to release the underlying software code with an open source license to other industries? Yes. So if we go to, and this website hasn't been updated recently, but here you can see more about EduAccess, and you can even find in the references the information model. And this is actually open source in a sense that you can ask for the code. We don't have it publicly available. That was a logistic constraints. We were just working with a very small team, and we didn't have the people to kind of upkeep that. But it's based on Base Row, and Base Row is also open source, and it's kind of a database, collaborative database. It's kind of like Airtable, but then open source. So with Base Row and with the front end and the back end, these things can be repurposed and used by other sectors as well, and public governments. So So I'm really hoping actually that others are interested and that together we can make this a more stable version, because right now we still put it in kind of, it is in production, of course, but we are still constructing it a little bit. Any ideas about how to collaborate and with whom, do let me know. So thank you for these thoughts that you have. I see that we have 9 minutes left, so I want to... Oh, I see that there's a question. Yeah, feel free, Ursula, to speak up.
It looks like her audio is just connected to the speaker, not the microphone. So Ursula, maybe if you want to type your question into the chat.
Thank you. So if we then go through the kind of the priorities that you had set in the beginning, I need to kind of quickly look at what you were sharing with me. So we tackled public values, we tackled collaboration and mapping the standards. Digital transformation, we kind of touched upon that very quickly. The learner journey, I took you through it, but very quickly. And the national programs, I won't go into that because of the time. But what I will share with you is, that this is a very much an ongoing effort. So this is nowhere near completely finished. And as my last question to you, I would love to know what conversation this sparks in your organization. So feel free to put your takeaways into the Menti. And you can find out more about the things that I showed you. So for example, the visuals that I used, they are all CC BY license. You can reuse them. You can even use the slide deck. All of my moving images, they are just PowerPoint. I know it's not open, but it was the easiest to use for now. And so the slide deck you can find on the interopervisual.eu, but also this app with, for example, LTI and how it's connected to other things is on eduaccess.eu. And actually the app is at app.eduaccess.eu. I would also like to invite you to connect with me. You can most easily reach me on LinkedIn or Mastodon, actually, but this QR code is for LinkedIn. But maybe the Mastodon or the Blue Sky, I'm on all of them. So you can just search for my name and find me there. And let me look at your conversations. So there's an open source project around LTI tools. Yes, so please send me a message about LTI tools and what you're going to do and who you're collaborating with. And maybe I can reconnect you to some European people. So the one thing that I can definitely invite you to is to see if you want to visit any type of community in Europe, then you are very welcome to come to EUNIS. So this is the yearly congress that we organize. It is in Romania this year, and it's at the University of West Timișoara. It's already in 2 months, and I think it coincides with one EdTech as well, but I'm not completely sure. And we have different special interest groups that we talk to. So we have, for example, inclusion and sustainability in AI. We have open science. We have learning technology. And there's also a book coming out around the unbearable lightness of AI. So this is not only the light, but also the dark that we're facing. And with EUNIS, we try to support the individuals within the institutions, but also enhance the resilience of the whole sector. So we are looking at it from really institution, the regional, the local, to the national, to the European, and then even the global, to see if we can kind of, raise the bottom of the understanding as well. And I think those might be my closing words. I will leave the last word to you. We have too many starters in higher education. Everyone wants to do their own thing. Yes, how do we foster collaboration? It's an age-old question. How do we look across the border and resist the not invented here syndrome? I think I don't have the final answer on this, but looking at the collaborations in Europe, what I see is there needs to be a good crisis. Never waste a good crisis, but there needs to be an incentive for people to say, we cannot go on like this. We need to collaborate. And then once that is there, collaboration is mostly across borders, building together instead of build your own thing and then see if you can put it everywhere. So building it together really helps. And this is what we're trying to do with the standards. European funded projects, they really help because we need to start with a consortium, and that consortium applies for the money. So if you want to get 1 million from the European Commission, you have to have a strong consortium, and that consortium needs to span across different regions. So that consortium building, I think that really creates the collaboration that we need. Yeah, we should work together in a consortium, Patrick. So exploring how these resources can be used to help learner data truly be mobile across the world. Yeah, that's a whole other hour. And I would actually love to have more in-depth conversations with you about this. So feel free to reach out to me if you want to spar about this. But it's really hard to do in a webinar where I'm just sending. My quick perspective about open source, the effort coming from EU and universities from SURF. What is coming? Okay, that's a really big question for the last minute. My quick perspective about open source. I think it's the truly necessary backbone of a lot of infrastructure and a lot of software. And I think we can't do anything without open source, but I also don't think everything should be open source. And that's saying that I think that it's healthy to also have commercial parties. I think it's healthy to have business models around things, as long as we do it with the same vision of kind of creating the best ecosystem. So kind of a healthy ecosystem needs both. I think that's it. But I do think that for open source, we need to put in a little bit more effort together. Yeah, that's about trusting each other and trying to speak the same language. What's coming? I cannot start to say. I'm sorry. But we will see it soon enough. So thank you so much for your engagement, for your inputs, creating the story together with me. I hope we can connect after this. And yeah, I'm wishing you a lovely day, for me evening, for you start of the day.
All right, well, thank you so much for a wonderfully engaging presentation, and sparked lots of interest in me and ideas and things. So hopefully we can connect afterward. But I hope that you all enjoyed this and had something you can take away to your own institutions. And this session, just as a reminder, has been recorded. So if you want to send it out to folks and have them, be able to experience it as well and take away nuggets for their institutions, please forward to your friends and colleagues. And let them also have the opportunity to have this wonderful content for their own. So thank you again, Evelien, for a wonderful presentation, and all of you for attending. And hopefully you will join us next month for our May Microconference. Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.